The United States has enormous power over the international financial system that no other country has. And so that makes U.S. sanctions much more powerful and therefore deadly. We actually did a study on this, two of my colleagues at CEPR, Francisco Rodriguez and Silvio Rendon, to estimate how many people die each year from these broad economic sanctions. The estimate was 564,000 people a year, about the same as the amount of people killed in armed conflict. It is therefore a form of economic violence. They're illegal under international treaties that we've signed. And of course, by the US Constitution, if you sign a treaty, it prohibits it in the United States as well. They're also illegal under US law. When the president orders sanctions, the president has to issue an executive order. And it says that the sanctioned country is creating a national emergency in the United States. Secondly, that the sanctioned country presents an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. There's almost none that could really fit that category. Out of the 113 countries that now have sanctions, sanctions have increased enormously. So in 1975, there were only 24. So they've become increasingly what the U.S. Treasury Department called it, a tool of first resort to address a range of what they call threats to the national security of the United States. And of course, again, it's not even true about that. But it is true that it's become a tool of first resort. And why is that? Because when you drop a bomb on a wedding party in Afghanistan, everybody sees it and it looks terrible. But this is not seen. People don't know about it. That is why it's become the violence of choice that the United States uses to maintain control over other countries. There was an election in Honduras, November 30th, and this is just one example of many. And here, what did President Trump did? He intervened in that election by telling people that if they didn't vote for his candidate, that they would suffer economically. Hondurans didn't have to look too far to see what happened to Venezuela. And that was huge, okay? They had the worst depression caused by the sanctions. From 2012 to 2020, the sanctions from the United States destroyed 74% of their economy. 74% of GDP is what they lost, more than 3 times the size of the U.S. Great Depression. So you can imagine how many people died there. In the first year, we had actual survey data from 3 universities showed tens of thousands of people died. That was from the first year of the Trump sanctions. About a quarter of the country left the country. So you can see what these sanctions do. And of course, the Hondurans about to vote in this election who weren't going to vote for their kids to go hungry. I think the Congress can stop the government from doing it. And there's been efforts there. Congressman Jim McGovern, when he was chair of the powerful House Rules Committee, sent a letter to Biden describing the sanctions in Venezuela. He basically explained how they target civilians, which, U.S. officials have said openly and publicly. There were 21 members of Congress that signed a letter about a year later to Biden, and one of them was a co-chair of Biden's campaign. And they said, you got to remove the sanctions on Venezuela and Cuba. And now it's cutting off oil illegally, of course, with a blockade of Cuba. That's really destroying the economy. And so this is a Congress pushing back. Congress is the least unaccountable branch of our government. They have done things like this before that made a difference. In 2019, both houses voted to support a war powers resolution ordering the U.S. military to get out of the war in Yemen. And that led to a de-escalation of the war. In fact, Trump ended up vetoing it, but he also stopped U.S. military from refueling the Saudi planes midair. It saved a lot of lives and also led to the de-escalation. So that's an example where it can make a difference. The key is when it becomes indefensible, which is what happens when people know what's really going on. That happened with the war in Yemen. Then it becomes impossible for them to continue doing it.